From barracudas that inflict deadly bites to electric eels capable of killing a horse on the spot, here are the sea creatures you'd better never come across. Let's go on vacation! Imagine that you've just decided to take a trip to an island in the Bahamas, in the northern Caribbean Sea. You have the soul of an adventurer, and you have been dreaming for a long time of diving in this part of the ocean in order to admire the coral reefs up close. Now you are about to get your wish. You are enthusiastic and impatient, and the fear of sharks does not affect you. The only drawback, however, is that the sea is murky and not as turquoise as you imagined. You dive anyway, and a few minutes later, despite the partial clearness of the water, you manage to discern and contemplate the wonderful coral reefs. However, you have a feeling you are being followed and observed, and you try to make your movements more discreet. You don't know it, but many others like you have felt this discomfort in the murky waters of the Caribbean. It's because of a predator, not the shark, but the barracuda, which scares so many divers. They are smart and aggressive carnivorous fishes, from which nothing escapes, and which attack more often in turbid waters. If you don't see them, they are watching you. The surest way to provoke them is to draw attention to yourself by wearing shiny objects, being injured, or making too many movements. You could be attacked, and the barracuda's bite inflicts deep and potentially fatal wounds. Luckily, nothing happened to you. You were ignoring the threat, but that won't be the case anymore. If you plan to dive again, you'll want to avoid the murky waters. In 1880, the German geographer and naturalist Alexander von Humboldt undertook an exploration of the fresh waters in South America. His goal was to study closely a fish with fascinating properties, which inspired a general fear among the local population, the electric eel. The naturalist wanted, on the other hand, to establish precisely the connection between the functioning of the living body and electricity. Accompanied by his assistants, von Humboldt went to the Amazon, and the first thing that struck him was the fear that these eels caused in the local population. He found it all the more exaggerated that no local resident would deign to help him in his research and to indicate to him the place where he was most likely to find them. But he managed to convince a guide, and the shippers, mounted on horses, headed for a river. The outcome of this search was favorable. In his account of this exploration, we learn that the German scientists managed to capture 5 large eels in a short time, which he studied for many hours. However, the capture was not an easy task. Indeed, the local guide, who was too afraid of the eels, had judged more prudent to send first the horses and the mules in the water. Immediately, the electric eels flocked and rubbed against the bellies of the animals. Within 5 minutes, the horses were drowned. But von Humboldt, far from being impressed, took matters into his own hands and captured the battle-weary eels. He later recounted that he and his team studied them for so long that they cramped and nauseated. But the study was valuable. The German scientists knew that it would help medical progress. Today, electric eels are an ideal case study to better understand neurotransmission. Do you like this video? In that case, don't forget to give us a like, to subscribe to the channel, and to activate the bell to not miss any of our next videos. We continue. A 29-year-old Australian woman who loves to dive had a painful experience because she neglected the danger posed by whales. Off the west coast of Australia, the Ningaloo Coral Reef is a true underwater paradise. The young Australian wanted to see the spectacle up close, which offered a fabulous diversity of multicolored life. But her pleasure exceeded her expectations. Indeed, the charm of her underwater excursion was redoubled by the presence, not far from her, of 2 humpback whales. You can imagine that she was quite happy until the accident that was the subject of several articles and investigations. As you already know, swimming with whales carries many risks. They can transmit diseases such as brucellosis, which could affect your reproductive system. They can also feel stress because of your intrusion in their habitat and become aggressive, especially if you touch them. In these moments, it is better to keep your distance because an agitated whale can crush you fatally. Our young Australian almost lost her life for this reason. More precisely, she found herself trapped between 2 whales. Too confident, she didn't think to move away from them. The result was dramatic. She was seriously injured and suffered from internal bleeding, but luckily she was saved. It is not by chance that the safety advice is so strict in Australia regarding swimming with whales. It is recommended to keep a distance of 15 meters between the swimmer and the animal. The Australian obviously did not take this advice into account. The Vampire of the Abyss. This is not a nickname, but the literal translation of the scientific name. Similar to squid and octopus, This fish, however, has some frightening physiognomic particularities. But don't worry, there is no chance you will come across it because it lives in the so-called mesopelagic zone. That is to say, at a depth where the sun's rays no longer shine and where photosynthesis is therefore impossible. Living at a depth that can exceed 900 meters, only underwater robots can approach it. And this obscure life is not to the displeasure of our small, monstrous fish. To live in these extreme conditions, nature has provided it with organs that produce light, and to confuse the rare predators that attack it, it can repeatedly emit flashes of light and eject a cloud of sticky mucus. But in general, it manages to lose predators without resorting to these means of defense, which conserves energy, a precious thing at this depth, where food is almost impossible to find. But the good thing is that at the depth where it lives, it cannot be harassed by the inopportune curiosity of researchers. When he is captured and subjected to artificial experiments, he does not reveal much of his mysteries to the scientists. Its monstrous aspect is the reason for the name that was given to it, but in fact, it is a small injustice, because this fish is not known for its danger. However, its strange character has earned it a small popularity, and there are many documentaries about this fish, as hideous as it is harmless. The peculiarity of the pufferfish, or fugu, is that it can inflate itself when it feels threatened. Nicknamed the river pig, its meat is very popular in Japan and other countries. However, not all restaurant owners can offer it in their dishes. In fact, cooks who want to prepare a dish containing this fish must first receive special training. At the end of this training, the restaurant owners receive a license accredited by the state. This condition, which may come as a surprise, is easily explained by the high toxicity of the pufferfish. More precisely, this fish does not produce the poison itself. Instead, it feeds on poisonous algae, and the toxin it ingests is not digested but stored in its liver. All the art of the restorer thus consists in delicately separating the healthy parts from the toxic parts of the fugu, at the risk of poisoning the consumer. Once the diploma is obtained, the restaurant owner can enjoy the privilege of serving this apparently delicious dish. However, he has no right to make mistakes, and he must be precise like a surgeon. Accidents are mostly due to ignorance of the dangers. Many uninformed fishermen have the misfortune to taste this deadly fish. Moreover, there are many cases of fugu poisoning in several countries. If the figures are far from being exact, the deaths due to bad cutting of this fish are not less real. On several occasions a few centuries ago, Japan prohibited the consumption of fugu, and the current law forbids the Japanese emperor to eat this fish. There are still other species of fish responsible for poisoning if they are badly prepared, and this form of poisoning has a very precise name: tetrodotoxism. Discovered in 1909, this toxin is present in the ovaries and in the liver of the pufferfish. If you eat a badly prepared fugu, you will feel the symptoms of poisoning about 3 hours after your meal. You will feel nausea, numbness, and tingling in your mouth and tongue. A few moments later, you will find it increasingly difficult to make simple movements. Your motor skills are impaired and your muscles are partially paralyzed. This paralysis will then affect your respiratory system. This is the ultimate phase. Without treatment, you will probably die of asphyxiation. As an anecdote, a famous Japanese actor, Bando Mitsugoro VIII, claimed in 1930 that he was strong enough to resist fugu poison. In a prestigious restaurant, he ordered, "Brace yourself, 4 portions of the animal's liver." What do you think happened to him? Well, he died after 7 hours of convulsions and paralysis. If you were a surfer and you practice your hobby in certain areas, especially in the Western Indian Ocean or in Southeast Asia, one of the worst things that could happen to you would be to be bitten by a beaked sea snake. Generally, if you are aware of the danger it represents, you would rather not see one, but assuming you are not sufficiently aware of the risks, you might find them harmless or mistake them for morays or eels. The fact is that sea snakes are discreet, but they are also known for their aggressiveness, and their bite is all the more dangerous because it is painless and imperceptible. You could be bitten on the ankle without noticing it and get out of the water all happy to have a good time. But in the meantime, the venom will have spread, and 30 minutes after the bite, the first symptoms of envenomation appear. If you are not treated, the neurotoxins will quickly cause muscle paralysis and respiratory arrest. Fortunately, there are effective treatments, and cases of fatal bites are very rare. Good for you, but next time, you won't take reckless risks. 2 Australians, a father and son, passionate about fishing, went one day off Bunbury to practice their favorite activity. The sea was calm and the day was bright. While they were sailing, they saw a strange and imposing shape on the surface of the water. From the distance they were at, it was difficult to determine what the mass was. It was large, spherical, pinkish, and shiny, and the 2 fishermen could not repress their desire to approach it. As they made their way towards the mysterious floating body, the father noticed white sharks around the boat, but neither he nor his son felt threatened at the moment. Their experience and their frequent trips to the sea had accustomed them to this disturbing neighborhood, and besides, what mattered to them now was to know what this object was. The closer they got to it, the more they thought it was an abandoned balloon. But the stench that reigned near the object revealed its nature. It was a southern right whale carcass. This justified the influx of more sharks than usual. As for the size of the animal, the two fishermen knew very well that it was due to the decomposition of the organs, and by the work of the bacteria that released by feeding on the internal tissues. The gas is what caused this always spectacular swelling. Now the father and son could clearly distinguish the carcass. It was streaked with veins, and its flesh was very stretched, which worried them. They knew that it was dangerous to get too close to an inflated whale. It is no coincidence that Australian authorities establish a safety perimeter when whales wash up on beaches. The reason is that they can explode under the pressure of the gas accumulated inside, so it is better not to admire these colossal beasts too closely when they are inert on the sand. For our two fishermen, it was only too obvious that the fishing party had to be postponed. However, this adventure made them the center of local attention for a few days, and they told the press about the circumstances of the find. The father declared that he had never seen this fascinating phenomenon up close. Thus ends our overview of dangerous sea creatures. Feel free to leave your opinion in the comments and tell us which of these fish you would never want to see up close.